just waiting for everyone from Facebook Live to join us as well. But not sure if our Zoom audience is here yet. Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening at our Zoom Books and Bubbles event. I believe we're also live streaming on Facebook, so a very warm welcome to you all. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dora Pappas and I'm the editor of Better Homes and Gardens. I'm absolutely thrilled to bring you this event with Hachette and our partner QBD. And of course, to introduce you to the multi-talented, and I do say multi-talented, Megan Albany, the author of The Very Last List of Vivian Walker. Just before I start, well, I throw you, well, we're not going to throw you anywhere, Megan.
Just throw me out the door.
No. Just before we go to all our questions from our audience, I just wanted to go through some housekeeping points. And number one, of course, is if you haven't bought the book yet, you can buy the book from our partners QBD, and there will be a link in the chat, so you'll be able to buy the book straight away. And if you have any questions for Megan, you can enter them in the Q&A box. And if you're joining us via Facebook, just leave a comment and I'll endeavour to get to all the questions so that Megan has an opportunity to answer them to you. Well, welcome, Megan. Sorry, I nearly threw you out of the room. I didn't mean to do that. I just wanted to say I loved the book. It was absolutely brilliant. But if you wanted to perhaps give a brief synopsis for those who haven't read the book yet, or who intend to buy it, or even a recap for those who have read it, do you mind giving us a bit of a synopsis?
Sure. So The Very Last List of Vivian Walker is basically a book about a woman who is married and she's got a child and she finds out that she's dying. And so she has this to write, but it's not your usual bucket list. It's the list that every woman has of things that she still needs to do despite the fact that she's dying. So she still needs to clean the fridge and, actually get her husband to do some of the things on his list, because even though at first it's like, oh, you've got cancer, let's help. Eventually he can't change the habits of a lifetime. So she still is kind of burdened with the bulk of the things to do. And so I guess it's a mundane love story about real life and real death.
I'm just reading some of the comments here, and I've got Margaret from Margaret Wilson, and she's from Ballarat, and she says she's sipping her G&T. Well, Margaret, I wish I was sipping mine. What are you sipping, Megan?
I'll show you. I'm more of a tea girl, as if you've read the book, you would know I'm a big fan of the tea. So I've got my chai tea with a bit of honey in it. That's what I'm sipping.
Lovely. And I've got my water at the moment because I think I'll need it. Anyway, I'll just ask a question that I'm interested in knowing about. Death and dying is, it's such a personal thing to be writing about. How did you shape, when you approached the topic, how did you go about shaping that topic? How did you go around?
Look, I guess, having spent a bit of time with a friend in palliative care, it was actually easy. I've been working on my second book. This one had a natural shape for me because I knew that journey intimately. I knew the journey of you're fine and you look fine and everything seems normal, but you're dying, to the very end where it's obvious that you're dying. So I knew it had a natural shape, which was good. And I guess I've had a lot of people die in the past 10 years, so I knew all about funerals and, planning funerals and all of that sort of stuff. So it really had a natural shape. So I was really lucky with that. It wasn't hard. And I'm not a planner. I know some amazing novelists all plan and they plot it out, and there's all those rules you meant to do. I don't follow any of those. I just fly by the seat of my pants and hope that at the end I've got a novel that somehow strings itself together and makes sense.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that. And I don't write anything as amazing or as you do. I mean, I'm writing, decorating when I'm writing, but I sort of just start and however it comes together, and it sometimes does right at the end.
Look, and I should actually give a shout out to the editors at Hachette too, because there was some shaping that needed after the initial draft, and they were just amazing with what they did. And editors in general, like they're always the people in the background that do the amazing job of polishing and just being able to see, get that bird's eye view from above of what's happening and what isn't happening. And I'm not a details person, so I really needed people to tell me, that actually wouldn't have been around at that time. You might need to check your dates, or I think you need to have the same consistent job for Clint's father all the way through rather than changing his job halfway through. So I did need my editors.
Editors certainly, and I can tell you our sub-editors are absolutely brilliant. They keep us in line as well, because they, as you say, they have that wonderful overview, and they're not as I always say we can never see our own mistakes, and yeah, you do need subs and you do need editors. Look, I do have a question here from, it's an anonymous attendee. Oh no, actually it's from Helen. Megan, what are you working on now?
I'm working on a few week overdue second book, which is called The Tuck Shop Lady, which I think I'm on the last chapter, which is good because it's actually due on Monday, so that's good. And it's called The Tuck Shop Lady, which is basically, it's about an old school tuck shop lady with the cream buns and the meat pies, and her turf gets invaded by the paleos and the gluten-frees and the vegans. So it's about change in a different way to the very last list of Vivian Walker, but I think the tuck shop lady knows how to stand her ground pretty well.
We love a good old tuck shop lady, don't we? I remember those as well. And I remember the cream buns as well, and so do my hips. Anyway, Sharon's asking, how long did it actually take you to write the book?
Look, it probably took around a year to write the book. I was really lucky. It kind of happened accidentally in that not long after I'd lost my friend, I joined a writers group, and we all had prompt sentences that we wrote from. And so I wrote little bits and pieces, and before I knew it, all the bits and pieces were about death and the novel was starting to form itself. And I'd be really excited at some point. I'm very lucky to be in a group with some amazing writers, but once their books are published, it'll be a bit of a Where's Wally, because there will be a couple of sentences that we've all got in common, but totally different books.
There you go. So that's good. I have a question from Jody, who's asking, what authors do you read for pleasure?
I'm very eclectic. I read authors that people hand me for pleasure. I've spent a lot of time, to be really honest. I love actually children's literature. If I need to just chill out, I don't mind a bit of Paddington Bear and Enid Blyton, which isn't very intellectual of me. But then, I'll also go for Aeneas Nin for something completely different. So I'm very eclectic in my tastes. And lately I've had some fantastic authors that Hachette have been releasing, and of course I love a lot of our First Nations authors.
Yes.
I've read Melissa Lukashenko's work and really love that. The most recently, kind of her work, and Nadia Simpson as well. I really love her most recent book, Crocodiles. Yeah,
that's good. I'm just going between screens here because I just want to make sure I get everyone's questions. How long did you write for each day? And did you have a day-to-day job at the same time?
Yes, look, at the time I was a journalist part-time, And then in the editing process, I ended up not having that because I just found the computer time, too much computer time, and my back and my head. I was actually getting really bad migraines, so I had to kind of give that up at the time. But I'm not one of these people that has a set routine. Sometimes I wake up this morning I woke up at 1:30 in the morning, and sometimes I'll get out of bed and write then. Often at 4:30 or 5:30 in the morning when I first wake up. I find the less conscious I am, the better a writer I am. If I think too much, I'm not very good. So it tends to be, and I probably write 1,000 words a day when I'm really in the swing of it, sometimes 2,000 words a day. But it's very spasmodic. I would be very bad at teaching people in a course, which is hilarious because I'm starting my PhD. I'm meant to be able to eventually teach people how to creative write, but I write creatively, including my routine and my schedule. It's a bit all over the shop. I tend to be a morning writer though. Don't ask me to write after lunch.
I was going to say it's do as I say, not as I do. Is that right?
Exactly. I actually went to a conference, the CYA conference, and there was a writer there. This was when I was about third of the way through the book, and there was one of the writers was talking about this is how she plans it all out, and I was taking all these notes and thinking, I don't do that, I don't do that, I don't do that. And then the next person got up and she was the one who introduced me to planners and pantsers, so fly by the seat of your pants. And that's when I went, oh, I am a proper writer. That's me.
I do get that. I do understand. And some of us work better to a deadline, don't you think?
Oh, look, being a journalist, I definitely work to a deadline. But I'm used to, this is my first novel, so I'm used to a deadline where it's get it done that day, wham, bam, out it goes, and tomorrow's fish and chip wrapper, and you're not worrying about people reading it for years to come either. So it's very different writing a novel, I've got to say. It's a lot of work.
But enjoyable.
If I'd have known that, I wouldn't have.
But wonderful that people are going to enjoy it and keep the book as well. So, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. In popular culture, sometimes we focus on, especially sort of at a funeral, we might focus on people's noble moments and, the big picture. But yours was sort of about the little moments, the everyday moments of life. So, was that something that was really deliberate? Did you choose to do that deliberately rather than,
Well, I definitely wanted it to be real, and I just noticed that when people are dying, it is the little things that count. My friend Rebecca, when she was dying, she had to have the Wedgwood crystal glass by the bed. It had to be posh. She couldn't have any old glass. My sister Jo's best friend, when she was dying, had to have her carrots julienned. They couldn't be round. Even when she could hardly speak, she was still like, Jo, the carrots. She's like, I know you need them julienne, not round. And so I think as in particular as women, we want to control everything, and death's really about letting go of control. But also at the funerals, it's all we don't go, oh, do you remember what a fantastic accountant he was, or that they won this prize or they won that prize? We actually talk about, oh, remember when he used to do that thing that used to annoy the hell out of us and it was so funny? And the weird thing is we actually look back with fondness often at the things that drove us crazy when people were alive.
Yes, that's so true. With this book, it's a bit of a love letter to men's imperfections. I've got to tell you, I know the story is partly written through Clint's eyes, or through the eyes of Clint. And I have to say, I absolutely fell in love with Clint. And I'll tell you why later, but you've deliberately not made him a saint. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, look, I accidentally fell in love with Clint too, which I didn't realize I was doing till I got to kind of the end, because I really think that men honestly want their women to be happy. They put up with a lot of bossiness from us, and I certainly am a list maker. And I just wanted, I'm really glad it came across like that. And a lot of the men who've read it I've had really great feedback. I didn't want it to be just a bitch session about men, because I think men really do try to do the things the way we want them, and we generally want them done a very specific way, and it's not easy to live up to the exact way that we need it done. It has to be that you either get it right or you're wrong, and most, a lot of the time you're wrong. So I did want to show his intent. He really did want to love her the way she wanted him to, but he's completely incapable of it, of course.
I loved
much
him,
as he tried.
much as he tried. But what I really loved about him, and when I just sort of realized that he's my absolute hero, was he was holding her hand in the hospital right to the very end.
Yeah.
And I just thought, wow, you are special, because I have known other partners who haven't been able to stick it out and haven't been there, or have walked away from the actual marriage or the partnership or whatever. And I just thought, you're my hero. You try really hard, and you're there, and you really do care and love that woman, and she's your rock.
Yeah. And I really did want that unconditional love. We talk about unconditional love and love as this thing that you love someone unconditionally. We don't actually go, that means loving someone who is sometimes horrible to you, and who's sometimes, useless, and who sometimes leaves you with the lion's share of the work, but who's it's just all of that, all of that stuff is unconditional love. And really it's that thing that I guess I got. I mean, I'm really lucky in my family. A lot of certainly my aunties and uncles are all still together, and I've seen them stick together through hating each other's guts sometimes. That's unconditional love. I hate you, but I'm still here hating you. That's unconditional love.
It certainly is. I have a question from Kelly. Do you have a favourite character in the book, and who was your favourite to write? So it's sort of two questions in that.
Oh, look, I loved Viv because she said all the things that we don't always get to say, of course. But I think my favourite to write was definitely, I loved Aunty Sugar. Was probably the most fun to write because she was the most over the top, and I could just let her do whatever she wanted, So she was really fun for me to write. And I also really liked Sally, because Sally was like this little ray of sunshine that I love that about her, even though she was traumatized and all that in her own right. I just loved how sunny she was, and how she could make, multi-level marketing a spiritual thing.
Emma's asking, where do you get your inspiration from?
Life, and death, lots of death. Yep. And I often some of it has come from initially from those prompt sentences. It can just be a word. I find that if I just sit down with the intention to write, sometimes I need to go somewhere. So someone will walk past and I'll go, oh, or, in my latest book, there was a flood because it hasn't stopped raining here. I wasn't planning for there to be a flood. So I kind of just react to the environment a little bit. I don't go looking for it, and I feel like a lot of it will just drop in. And that's why I possibly get inspiration from my dreams, because I tend to wake up really early and want to write. So I think a lot of it's sort of subconscious, whatever's been going on. And, you don't probably want to be my friend, because I'll probably steal bits of you and stick you in the book.
As long as you change my hair color and my shape, you're fine.
That's right. I can do that.
Steal away.
Just tell me what you want and I'll create it for you.
Don't worry, after this I will. You may not want to write about it. Sorry. I should just be quiet, Dora. What was the inspirational turning point in your life when you thought you had a story to tell, become an author? I just want to read that again just to make sure I've got that right. What was the inspirational turning point in your life when you thought you had a story to tell, become an author?
So my friend Rebecca died of cancer, and I spent a fair bit of time in palliative care with her because she had PTSD. And I'd lost a lot of people in the lead up to that. And Beck was really big into near-death experiences, and she was also a journo, and she'd wanted to start a publishing company, and we talked a lot in the lead up to her death about her starting a publishing company. So when she died, I think it was partly part of the grieving process that got me writing, and partly that I knew she wanted a publishing company. But one of the big turning points for me actually was I went to the launch of a local woman's children's book that she'd self-published at our local art post office. And when I saw her talking about it, I felt this little stab of jealousy, which I don't normally get. And I thought, oh, I must want to still write something. And then her name's Lisa Tiffin. She's a beautiful writer. And then she was one of the first people that started the local writers group, and she invited me in. So I used that jealousy to go, oh, okay, I didn't know I still wanted to write, because having been a writer as a journalist for such a long time, it was kind of it had become a bit of a job. So just meeting together with those women and our token mail every week, and listening to their writing inspired me to want to write. And then I just accidentally started writing from there. So that was probably the turning point, was really joining the writers group. Long answer.
I'm going to go on to another question now. Jody's asking, how did you get a contract for writing? Was it about rejections, or did it just kind of happen?
So I went to the CYA conference, which is a children and young adults conference that the writers group, a couple of them, because they were children's authors, went to, but they also had the odd adult session. So I just went along for the social as much as anything, and thought I'll pitch I had a couple of ideas and I wasn't sure which ones to go to. So I pitched, at the time it was called The List, to one of the people there. And I actually had a little bit of interest from Hachette at that point. But then it kind of got, nothing really happened with it at that point. So that was how it happened. But then when I finally did, I got signed to an agent who was actually someone I knew, who was new as a literary agent, and we sort of chatted about it, and she said, yep, I'm going to take this on. And she's now made that her career, but we'd kind of chatted about it. It was a bit out of the box. And then she went back to Hachette and got the deal. And the thing that was completely out of my control was that when I was signed with Hachette, my two editors were both called Rebecca, and my friend who had died was called Rebecca. So I felt like I had a little bit of help from above. But I had rejections before. I'd written a novella before, and to be honest, I'm not very good at rejection. I'd probably said that to two people being rejected and went, well, that's it, not doing that again. But you do have to be open to rejection, I think, and to not take it personally. But that's so easy to say, not so easy to do.
No, absolutely not. Melinda's saying she loved that you brought Clint the Star Wars collection with the $10,000 raised at the fundraiser. That was her ultimate sacrifice that signified her love for him on a level she was capable of. So, yeah, I loved that too. So thank you, Melinda. Does writing energize or exhaust you? Kelly's asking.
Both. Yeah, generally I feel like it actually lets me process things in my life. So generally I think it gives me energy when I'm heading towards a deadline and I'm pushing myself. I've been lucky in that I kind of just let the writing happen. But because I was really lucky to get a 2-book deal with Hachette, I've actually had a deadline for this, whereas the first one I just kind of wrote, and when it was ready, it was ready. So I guess, but I don't know that it's the writing that exhausts me. I think it's actually trying to live your life in and around it. I think it's the list of things I have to do in and around the writing that exhausts me. And I need to be better at actually culling my list, I think.
So you actually write lots of lists yourself?
Oh yes, lots of lists. And I'll really, this time I'm going to be really organized, and I'll have headings and I'll put them in a notebook, and then other times I'll lose that, and then I'll write it out on a scrap of paper or the back of a bill. And yeah, and I do write lists for my husband. Confession time.
Does he tick off the list? Does he actually?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes, I do monitor the list, and there was actually a conversation which I did have with some friends where someone had said, I think we just said, imagine if your husband wrote you a list, and we were like, what husband would have the balls to do that? Like we would absolutely. And I think that's where I started to get my first bit of understanding and compassion for Clint was, oh my God, if he did that for Viv, she would kill him. There's no way he would write a list for her, but we expect them to have lists written for them and to actually not only do them, but do them exactly the way we want them to do them.
that's
So
right.
yes, that was a little bit of a mirror for me.
Oh, okay. It's unique that you have incorporated your music into the experience. Thanks for the QR code. I'd like to know more about that. Is it Viv singing or you? So, should we, Megan, do you mind explaining about the soundtrack just so that
Sure.
everybody knows about it who
Yeah.
perhaps don't?
So my husband and I have both always been musicians, and I've always been a writer of words and a writer of songs my whole career. And so when I got the deal with Hachette, I thought, wouldn't it be amazing to have a soundtrack? Because we'd done some music for film and TV. And Rebecca Hachette was so beautiful in saying, yes, we can do that. And at the time, we thought, what's the easiest way to do that? Because you can't pay for extra CDs. Like, we just wanted to do that. So we thought we'd do this really new technology that no one had heard of, QR codes. And I thought, people won't even know how to use that. But then COVID hit, and of course we all now know how to use QR codes. So we decided to give away a couple of free songs in the audio book and also on the back of the book, so people could listen to some of the tracks. And we wrote a lot of the songs specifically. Most of the songs were written specifically for the book. And so while it's me singing, not Viv, we wanted them to be songs that kind of reflected her character. So there's a song called Man Flu, which is about man flu. And there's a song called Clean House, which was actually a beautiful friend of mine who's a longtime friend and a songwriter had written a song based on a Mae West quote, which is, a clean house is a sign of a wasted life. And I was like, oh, that is perfect for this book. And she allowed me to steal her baby and give it a facelift and a boob job and change all the lyrics, which was really lovely of her. So then we wrote that specifically the way I thought that Viv would want that. And some of it's even almost from Clint's perspective. There's a song called Whatever You Need. And basically there's songs that I think would be the soundtrack if it was made into a film, which, fingers crossed, that's what the kind of soundtrack would be, that I would hope it would be something like that, reflective of the characters.
Is there any talk? Sorry, I'll just jump in there. There was a nice little cue there. Is there talk of perhaps a film or?
Look, we're shopping it around. Going to a conference with Hachette that does books to film. So yeah, I've always I did screenwriting when I was at uni, and I see things really visually. So I've always seen it. I see it in my head.
Yep.
So I could imagine it would be a great film, and obviously I'd be very happy if it was a great film.
More suited to film than perhaps a stage production than a play?
Well, interestingly, when we were one of the reasons I had the idea for the music is when I was living in Ireland, my novella that I'd written, we actually did that as a theatre piece where we had an actor reading from the book, and then we interspersed that with songs that kind of related to the chapters that she was reading. So yeah, I guess it could be, I don't care, it could be Viv the musical.
Yes. You could sing it as well. I'm just going to ask a question from Sarah. What surprised you the most when writing the very last list of Vivian Walker?
Surprised me, I finished it. And I think it actually really surprised me how much I fell in love with Clint, I think, because that wasn't part of the plan, really. That surprised me, and also that I laughed at my own jokes.
You got a great sense of humor and a great laugh, let me tell you. For those of us dreaming of writing our debut novel, what advice would you give? And that's a question from Kelly.
Absolutely do not criticize yourself as you're writing. Write whatever comes out and don't try to edit as you go. That would be my absolute 100% advice, because it will take you places that you don't, it's a control thing. I think if you let go of control when you're writing and follow, just follow where it's heading rather than right, this is me being a pantser, so take this with a grain of salt. If you are a planner, feel free. But the main thing is whether you're planning or pantsing, you really don't want to be judging while you're writing. Certainly you can stop and then, look back at it. But we've kind of taken that approach in general with our writers group. And that's why I think everyone's finishing is to write the whole thing and then you come back and go, okay, what would I change? Because sometimes it kind of evolves along the way. And if you change something early on, you might not have ended up at this place. And often I think you make the most changes when you finish right at the beginning. You go back and you make the beginning fit the end rather than the other way around.
Yeah. I was just, sorry. How do you manage writer's block?
Don't really get it.
That's good.
Whenever I have felt like I have to write today, I try not to write because I have to write. I try to write. For me, it's a bit of an impulse thing. It's kind of creativity in general is something I feel like I got to write something. But if I do get writer's block, those prompt sentences are great. You can just look up on online, just look for prompt sentences or just grab a sentence out of a book or a word or an object. And one thing that I actually used to do, because I did teach creative writing years ago, and I found it work with lots of people, is if you're stuck, you just keep writing the same sentence over and over again without stopping your pen. You just keep going, because what that does is it turns off that critical side of your brain, because it's the critic that will stop you writing. It's the part of your voice that says, you're no good, this is crap, blah, blah, blah. Don't listen to that. Or if it won't shut up, write the critic, and maybe the critic will become one of your characters. Like Viv is fairly critical.
I can't quite see who's asked this question, but how did you feel when you finished the last sentence of the book?
I was sad. I didn't want to finish it. And actually I started a sequel, but the sequel isn't going to be my second book because I kind of felt like I needed to work with the character. I needed to grieve my characters, and I didn't really want to say, saying goodbye to Viv was one thing, but having to say goodbye to all of them, I didn't actually want to say goodbye to them all. So it's kind of, you feel a bit empty, I think, when you finish a book. But I feel, whether you're writing it or reading it, I often feel that when I finish a book, I'll go, oh, and then you're kind of left with this empty feeling that you've lost your friends.
Yeah, I was wondering about Clint and Ethan, and I just wanted to know more about their journeys after they've passed on. So yes, I was going to ask you that very same question. So thank you very much for saying there is another book coming, but not the next one.
No.
Who would you like? Kim's asking, who would you like to play Viv in the movie?
Oh, you know who I thought would be fantastic? Actually, there's two people that I thought would be fantastic, whether it was a movie or a stage play. Kitty Flanagan, I think, would be a great Viv. And the other person is Steph Tisdall, who's a fantastic First Nations comedian that has done a lot of stuff with black comedy. If you haven't looked her up, look her up. But she would be a fantastic Viv. Just someone with a big attitude.
Big personality.
Yeah.
Do your characters become friends? And someone's asking, will any of them come back? And you've sort of answered that, but have they become friends?
Yeah, look, they definitely have it. And Aunty Sugar was actually, I have a friend that I nicknamed Aunty Sugar because when she used to come to my house, it was like she'd fed my dog and my child sugar, because they'd be like, like that after she left. But it's interesting though, because the Aunty Sugar in the book, even though it started with that, is not my friend at all, but she's a completely different friend. So yeah, they do become friends. but yeah, and that's why I felt like I had to do a sequel, because I wasn't ready to say goodbye to them yet. Yeah.
Did you cry while writing?
I did. The hardest, the one I cried the most in was writing the letter to Ethan, because having a son, I think any mother can relate to what would you say to your child if you knew you were going to leave them. So that one definitely made me cry, and it made me cry even when I reread the book. And I guess they were the moments I knew that worked, when on the 8th or 10th read in the editing process, when I thought I wanted to just throw it in the bin and never see the book again. The bits that still made me cry and still made me laugh were still there. There were, a few of them. Some of them I go, oh, that joke. That's not even funny. But no, I cried every time I read the letter to Ethan, because I think as a mum, it's just something that we all relate to. From the minute your child's born, you think, what would you do if they died or if you died? And actually, I remember when my son was little, something happened, and he was about 3, and he suddenly got into his head about death. And he said, Mummy, if I died, you wouldn't be able to see my cuteness. And then he got really upset. And so I just said, well, if you died, Mummy would come with you. And then I had to say to my niece, if my son dies, I'm going to have to kill myself, because I've promised him I'm going with him.
I'm holding his hand the whole way.
The whole way there. And of course, when my friend Rebecca died, I was in the hospital, even though she was 45, I was in the hospital with her mother and her father. And, she was buried with her soft toy that her mother had from her whole life. And so for me, that was just like, someone's your baby, they're your baby their whole life. So that bit was really, that bit was hard to write.
Yeah. And I'm getting a little lump in my throat here.
Sorry.
So, can you, Sue is asking, can you talk about deadlines? Example, who decides how long you have to write? Is it per chapter or the finished book?
Yeah.
What's the deadline process there?
Yeah. So when you're certainly in my experience with Hachette, who, by the way, have been amazing, I submitted the book and it was 60,000 words, because I've been a short form writer my whole life and I was lazy and I went, that'll do. Then I had to write. So then I was given a whole series of editing points. So the first editing is kind of a big picture editing, and that first bit, I think I might have had a couple of months to get up to the word count that they needed me to get up to. And then after that, there were all different sorts of editing. There's kind of your real structural editing, which is big picture and making sure that all the details are right. And then there's, the line editing, where it's all those details. And like I said, I'm not very good at details, so that was good for me. But I pretty well had a year in the editing process with deadlines. But they told me right at the beginning, this is what you'll be doing, and then this is the next, and this is the next. And I also knew that I had a year to write my second book. So I was editing. That was the only thing I didn't get, was how amazingly thorough the editing process is, because once again, I've never really had to do that. I've just gone, oh, well, off you go, off to the paper or whatever, and I'll let go of that. You only have time for so much editing. I always worked in generally.
Oh, I think we have a bit of a lag. I'm so sorry.
Daily papers, but I did.
Can everybody hear me?
And when I got signed for the second book, they said to me, do you think you can write a book in a year? And I was like, oh, yeah, no problem. But I didn't realize about the editing. So I did have a say in that deadline that I signed up for.
Gemma's asking, what do you hope readers will take away from the book?
Oh, look, it's been really nice what people have taken away for the book, and more than I could have hoped for. Like the thing that's moved me the most is how many people have either been through this journey or are going through this journey that actually found it cathartic and felt like, I guess, that they're not the only people going through an experience like this imperfectly. Because the truth is, when we're under crisis and we're going through death, we're not like in the movies. And actually the worst of people can come out, not the best. And I think what I'd like them to come away from this book with is some compassion for themselves and for others when they turn up imperfectly and the worst side of them comes out. Because I think that's actually natural under pressure. Not everyone becomes, Mother Teresa under pressure. Most of us go a little bit cray-cray. And if there's someone that we blame them the most when the chips are down.
I'd say I'm cray-cray all the time, but I can't wait to see what I'm going to be like when the chips are down, really down. We have someone who's just said they've read the book via Audible and the narrator absolutely slayed that letter. It was the most powerful part of the Audible version. And Megan, you know that I actually read the book via Audible as well. And it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So I'd say you'd agree with that, wouldn't you?
Yeah, look, and I've just been getting such amazing feedback from people on the Audible. So I'm so grateful to Lisa Mazza because she's done a really good job. And the first time I listened to it, I was a bit like, oh, what's it going to be like hearing someone do the characters? And I kind of went, okay. And because most of the time, even her timing and everything is exactly how I heard it in my head. Of course, there are some variations in her interpretation, but for me, having written it, it's actually sometimes brought out different parts of what I meant than I'd meant, and like an additional meaning in the way she's interpreted how she's read it. So yeah, well done. And I know it's a pretty quick process recording an audio book, and she did a fantastic job. So really grateful to her for that.
I didn't know that. How quick is the process? Do you know exactly?
I think it's 4-hour days in the studio.
Wow.
So yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
I think I've spent time in the studio, doing albums, and you get to do takes and retakes and retakes and retakes. So yeah, she just really obviously fell into the characters. She'd obviously read the book before, but she just managed to drop herself into the book and stay there, which I think is really impressive.
Very impressive. Kelly's saying, thank you so much for writing about death and dying. I'm a palliative care worker and death is so taboo. It's wonderful that you're using your platform to write such a wonderful story and to make it okay to talk about this topic.
Yeah, look, and our palliative care workers are amazing. I actually have one of my best friends now was Beck's palliative care nurse, and I didn't realize that we lived in the same street until after Beck had died, and we realized, so we became really good friends. And Beck was lucky enough to be cared for in a community-run hospice, the only one in New South Wales, and the volunteers and the palliative care workers were amazing. And I think what people don't get and why we don't talk about it is how beautiful it is and how amazing it is to be able to sit with someone. I think I mentioned it in an article I spoke about before. It's like a birth, or, it's one of the most important times you can be there for someone. And if someone asks you to be with them, it's such an honor. Like, it's better than a bridesmaid. You don't have to wear those fluffy dresses with the, you can just turn up in your tracky deck. So it's better than that.
Yeah, and be there and comforting someone and just be there for them all, while they're going through this.
Yeah, and if you're lucky, they'll have a great sense of humor like my friend did, and they'll do things like want to pretend they're dead to everyone before they are, and
She sounds like a character. She really does.
She was.
I think it might be Catherine is asking, how long did it take from a yes from Hachette to having your book released?
So it was over a year because the editing process takes about a year. And I think, I can't remember the exact dates, but I think I probably signed at the end of the year and then it came out in the January the year sort of after. So probably about a year and 3 months, I think, ish.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not very good at times.
You're a good writer, so that's what's more important. Don't worry. Megan, did you ever consider Viv controlling her own end by some form of euthanasia, particularly in the climate of voluntary euthanasia that is being pushed for in this day?
No, because she was a mum. That wouldn't have been, the one thing she didn't want to do was leave her son. So she wouldn't have wanted to do that. Whereas, I know my friend wanted me to give her the pussycat drugs if it all got a bit too hard for her, but I said, I don't really want to go to jail, much as I love you. So yeah, no, it just didn't feel natural. It didn't enter my head to do that. Even though in a weird way, my friend Rebecca had wanted to die. Yeah, it just didn't feel true to who Viv was as a mother. Not that, some mothers might want to do that. It wasn't a judgment. It was more just I didn't feel that Viv would do that.
Louise asks, she loved the cover. Were you involved in choosing it?
Yeah, look, that was the thing I didn't get, was one that the title and the cover, you work with your publisher on that, and obviously they know what sells books, and it's most important what what's going to make someone reach out and pick it up off the shelf. That's what you want from your cover, but also that it reflects what's inside the book. And I was really happy with that. And Krista Moffat, who was the designer, came up with bits of that, and then we kind of went, oh, what about that, and what about if you change this, and it took quite a while to decide what shoes would be on the cover. And the shoes were actually specifically illustrated for the cover, so sometimes and how they had to face and all that. There was quite a lot of discussion about the shoes, which I didn't realize there would be doing a cover, but yeah.
It's funny with the things we focus on as editors. If you knew what we focus on with decorating, it's like we might spend 3 hours styling a throw, just a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. That's ridiculous. This is the cover of a beautiful book, so I quite understand the discussion. Ben's asking, how much of an adjustment is it writing a novel compared to journalistic writing?
It's an adjustment because it's a lot more words. It's a lot more work. And also I think your brain gets used to the arc of the story when you're writing at a certain, like if I'm doing a feature piece as a journalist, it's only ever so long. And so I'm used to, this is where it starts and that's where it finishes. And I can kind of hold all that in my head. Whereas I did have to look back a few times, like I said, on some of the details and think, oh, what's that? And try to remember. I did at one point have to write out some of the main plot points afterwards to try and track, have I gone off track here? And at one point I printed out all of the chapters and juggled some around to see if some went somewhere and some went other places, because I couldn't do that on the computer. I think having grown up using pen to paper, I needed to somehow bring it back to something I could shift and move around. So it was an adjustment, but I think as a journalist, I've always wanted to know the story behind the story, So when I interviewed people, I never had an idea of, okay, this story is about this and this, and that's where it's going to go. I always would go, okay, I'm writing about a cow, but oh, hang on, no, I'm actually writing about something else. And so I like just following. And at one point when I was working for Vibe Australia, the Aboriginal media company I worked for, I got asked to go into television, and I did a little bit of stuff, but I didn't really like it because TV is much more. And it started because way back when film was happening, it was really expensive. So you had to know exactly what you were doing and plan it all out before you even got there. And I didn't like that control. I think I like the looseness of being able to follow the story. And so for me, that's similar. It's just a much longer story.
It's a similar process.
Yeah.
Karen's saying she has bought the books on her to be read pile. It just got moved up to the top, particularly if you imagine Kitty or Steph as Viv. I won't be able to get that out of my head. So there you go. And Kelly's going, agree, Karen, need to read immediately. So that's wonderful. There's another question coming through saying it was an interesting choice not going into the self-flagellation. It was my choice's fault. I got this. That is often involved with melanoma. Was this something you deliberately didn't touch on, or was this aspect edited out?
No, I didn't touch on that. don't think I don't know why I didn't touch on that. It just didn't. I'm not that deliberate, really. Sometimes it's just what comes through. I think that she's not really a self-flagellator. She flagellates Clint. It's all his fault. So it's much more likely to have been his fault than her fault, because nothing's her fault. It's all his fault.
Poor Clint. Christine's asking, could you clarify what you actually provided to your agent before she decided to proceed? Was it just initial chapters and synopsis?
No, I think I gave her the whole thing. I spoke to her about it at first. I did give her a synopsis and a bio, and yeah, and because I'd had that, and I think because I'd had that little bit of initial potential interest from her shed, I think that helped. Yeah, but I guess the thing that, having come from the music industry, having spent a lot of time in the music industry, the thing that I was really surprised at by the publishing industry, I had a bit of an image of it being full of all these horrible, nasty people who never got back to you and all of that, and slammed your book, and that hasn't been my experience, really. I think some of those conferences are good. That was the first time I went, oh, and plus it was a female dominated industry, and I'd come from a very male rock, sex and drugs and rock and roll industry, which was, and I got to the publishing conference, I'm like, oh, there's all these women and they're all smart and they're all, so I felt like I'd landed and, died and gone to heaven when I ended up in the publishing industry, because even journalism way back when was fairly male dominated, and publishing, a lot of the CEOs, most of them were women. So that was nice for me as a woman. And I think it's worth, there's always good people in every industry. And I think if you're submitting a book, it really has to be someone that, like, we kind of, at first we go in like just desperate, whoever will have me, I don't care. But actually, I think if you got, at one point I got offered, there was another agent just before I signed with Fiona, and Fiona was very new, and I got offered a very experienced agent, and I thought, I just went with my gut. I think you've got to go with your gut. And I went with her because I knew she'd give me the attention and the reassurance and that I needed, rather than an experienced agent that maybe had a lot of people on her hands and couldn't baby me through my first experience. So I think it needs to be people that you feel safe with, because when you're being creative, you need to feel safe with whoever is supporting you.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a lot to be said for going with your gut. I agree. Absolutely, totally agree with you. I don't know if you saw me, I had a big smile on my face a little while ago because someone wrote, bloody Clint didn't apply the sunscreen properly. And I thought, Megan must think, what she got that silly grin on her face for?
No, I didn't notice. But yes, he probably didn't. She probably asked him to rub it in and he left a patch. So I agree. Exactly. I should have added that in. You have to be my co-writer, whoever that was.
Very, very funny. Nikki's asking, what books or authors have most influenced your own writing?
Oh, I spoke to that one a little bit before, but and one of the things I said is I have read a lot of kids' books, actually, because I think they're kind of an escape for me away from the adult world that can be a bit full on. But I did a degree, and I've read so many people, and I'm really bad on the spot, right? Trying to remember who I've actually read. But look, everything from I really loved Anita Heiss, Am I Black Enough for You? That really affected me. I love Rabbit Proof Fence. So there's a lot of First Nations writers that I've read, but there's also I did 18th century poetry and Shakespeare. Actually, I would say Shakespeare was one of my huge influences years ago, because the thing that I love about Shakespeare is that the writing was lowbrow and highbrow. It spoke to people who had no education, and it spoke to people who had a really good education. And I love writing like that. I love anything that can be interpreted at whatever level you want to take it in. And Monty Python, even though they're not writers, they really affected me in terms of my terrible sense of humor.
Great sense of humor. I'm just going to urge our audience, if they have any more questions, we're starting to run out of time, unfortunately. So just jot down your last question so that we can ask them of Megan. I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed the book. I can't wait for the. I won't call it a sequel. What would you call it, a sequel, or is it?
Well, I guess it kind of is, but for me, where this one was about dying, the next one will be about grieving, and yeah. And I'm dying for Auntie to put Aunty Sugar and Clint together without Viv in the middle.
Can't wait. I can't wait to read that. I just want to say thank you so much, Megan. You've been a joy to interview this evening. You've answered everybody's questions. So I'm just going to ask one more question because it's just popped up. Any snippets about your next book?
Yes. So, and forgive me for people who heard this earlier, but my next book is actually called The Tuck Shop Lady, and it's about. I actually wanted to write it because, we talk about tuck shop lady arms, and I thought those poor tuck shop ladies, they work so hard, and the only thing we remember about them is their flabby triceps. And then I started to get them, and I thought, well, I'm going to defend those triceps. So it's about an old school tuck shop lady who, is stuck in her ways with the cream buns and the meat pies, and then the vegans and paleos and gluten-frees all start moving in on her turf, and she has to defend her right to dish up milk. And that is from cows.
And that'll be coming out in about a year's time, or?
Yeah, so that comes out around the same time that The Very Last List did, so I'm imagining around February next year.
So we'll be looking forward to that as well. Well, I just want to thank you again. You've been an absolute delight. I think our audience will agree with us, or will agree with me. Thank you very, very much. And I just want to say that we have another great event coming up next month, Wednesday the 16th of March, and that's with Ali Lowe, and she'll be talking about her book, The Trivia Night, and that's can just imagine a trivia night, a family trivia night, and that's a real page turner. Lots of shocking reveals, so I can't wait for that one. If you visit booksandbubbles.com.au, you can register for the event for free, and you can also sign up for the newsletter as well, so that if there are any other upcoming events, you'll definitely be notified. And you can also watch some of the past events like this one on demand as well. So don't forget to visit booksandbubbles.com.au. Thank you once again.
Dora, can I just put one last call out to anyone who's watching that we've actually started a hashtag. It's hashtag my Vivian Walker face. And it's because my beautiful sister sent me a photo of her ugly, smiling, laughing, crying face. And so I just want, because I'm, sadder. So I just want to see everyone's crying face with the snot and the ugly kind of, un-Facebook friendly faces. So if you feel like sending me those on my Facebook page, feel free, and I'll be sharing the best ugly, crying, happy, smiling face photos.
I don't know whether I'll partake, but yes.
Come on.
Okay. Twist my arm. Will we have any other takers? I'm just wondering. Anyway.
When you finish the book, or if you go back for a second read, take a selfie, a snotty selfie, we're calling them.
Snotty selfie I can do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dora. You were absolutely a delight to talk with. Thank you.
Thank you.